I'd love to talk a little bit about not just preparing for all of your talks, but preparing for your talks in different languages. So I know that both of you, give talks in both English and Spanish and Chinese, respectively. And I want to hear more about that. Is that something that you do you generally start in one language and then translate to the other? Do you give different talks to different groups? Would love to hear about that process.
Go, Paula.
Yes, it's interesting because at different times I feel like English and Spanish are my second language because, I was born and raised in Peru. I was there until I was 15. Peru runs through my blood. But at the same time, I immigrated to a country where English is the first language, and that's where I got, all of my education, or at least like higher level education. And so in certain ways, making my presentation in English is easier than in Spanish because I don't have all the technical jargon in Spanish, so it takes a little bit more work. I found that in creating crafted presentations, I will start with the larger ideas in English. And then once I'm ready to go into like practicing to myself or recording myself the presentation on what I would say, then I start just naturally practicing in Spanish. And then as I keep going, I run into, okay, I don't know how to say product management in Spanish, or I don't know how to say design sprint in Spanish. And I need to like go search those things and slowly fill in the gaps. So it takes a little more work at times, but it's definitely doable. Something that is really fun is that you have this perspective in two different complete worlds and cultures. And so you're able to be that bridge for those two different cultures through the examples that you put on your presentations, and also through the words that you choose, the idioms that you choose to share. And so I think that it just opens up a world of opportunities to be able to speak on those two languages, even though it can be a little bit hard at times.
That was lovely, Paula. For me, I think that when I prepare for different audiences, I usually have like an umbrella topic. So in my case, one of my favorite topics is always cross-cultural design. But in terms of like breaking down the examples, I would actually categorize and making sure that I have universal examples. For example, I always love showing the project I did with Disney Shanghai, which people know this brand because it's an international brand and people are interested in localization in China. So that's always a very fun project because there's not a lot of linguistic barrier because it's all visual. However, for example, there's another project I always love talking about it, but the audience response will be differently if I do it in China because it's a project about redesign a logo in Chinese character. So in China, it responds really well because people speak that language and they feel very relatable. However, if I do it, say, for example, in New York and facing a multicultural crowd, people like it, but the response is not as strong. So in this case, I kind of quickly realized the user feedback is not as positive as it should be in China. So next time when I do this with a multicultural background audience, I would choose something that is more visual, less linguistic. And so I would choose something like I did for India, for example, even though I don't speak that language and people can get the joke. And humor is such a powerful way of connecting people too. If it is a funny example and it makes people laugh, that's always helpful when you go anywhere, right? But if you're going to like a specific, specific audience, for example, I go to Australia, I would actually take some examples I did in Australia and people are like, wow, this is something I experienced like in the subway or in the airport all the time. So they feel that instant connection with your content. So that's kind of how you can localize your content and globalize your content according to where you're speaking.